Welcome to the Scoop World Order. We have a huge update. Big D tackle from Florida is coming in. We're going to break his film down, talk a little bit about him. He is an absolute monster. You're going to love his film. We're going to talk a little bit about summer conditioning. It has started this week. It is a pretty easy week, but we got some intel from Woody Hayes on that. So we're going to break that down a little bit and take your questions as we are 100 days away from the kickoff of the Division I college football season. So it is time to get excited, folks, because you're going to blink and it is going to be time for some football. But that being said, as always, thank you so much for tuning in every day. Appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a like. Click that like button. That is huge for us. The more likes we get, the more the video gets propelled to the top of the YouTube page. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Subscribe to the page if you enjoy the best premium Ohio State content. Fantastic work with Ryan and Bill Green on our other podcasts today, so check that one out as well. And if you like these live shows, click that little alert bell, and you'll get an alert every time we go live, so you guys never, ever miss a show. And as always, shout out where you're from. Love when you guys do that. We had in Egypt. We had Ghana. We were getting some places that I'm like, it's stunning that people are tuning in from there. So appreciate you guys as always. Shout out my Florida people. I saw Naples, Florida. New Albany, Ohio, South Point, Ohio, Ironton, obviously Columbus, Cleveland, Canton. So shout it all out. I love seeing where you guys are from. That being said, I'm going to bring in my summer conditioning lifting partner, Mr. Nevada Buck. Nevada, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mr. Barton. I just was reflecting on something you said on the last podcast. You were talking about how you weren't a very good player and everything like that. And I was just thinking how us mortals feel like if our kid gets an offer to like Bradley or to UMass or something like that, we like 99.999% of us would just like die and be like and for you it'd be like it's not one of the big schools, it's not Stanford or Notre Dame or Ohio State, and so it's like you just have to like feel like what it's like to be like the little people, you know what I'm saying? That you're like this titan and not like us little people, and so I don't think you understand us, Mr. Barton.
Well, I think that it starts somewhere. Like, I mean, I started off with Wittenberg and Muskingum, and those were the first offers when you're a sophomore, and then it grows into MAC schools, and then it grows into Big Ten schools, and it grows into Ohio State, and, that's where I ended up. But it's, again, I always just like to be kind of, I guess, tongue-in-cheek, kind of funny, because there's some guys that, they kind of go the other way, and they act like they're a lot better than they actually were, so I laugh at those guys, but it never hurts to make fun of yourself a little bit. I think people, they enjoy the humor, and again, like I know what it is. Like again, that's why I was making a point. I'm like, look, if I could have played at Ohio State 'cause I had Pace and Stringer in front of me, then I'm outie. See you guys. Good time being a Buckeye, but and that's why I don't fault kids. I don't fault quarterbacks that leave, especially at positions where you have to be the guy. There's only one guy. There's no rotation. So that's quarterback, that's offensive line, kicker, punter. Every other spot on the team has a rotation. So, you can at least crack into the rotational bit. And that's why it's also a lot harder to replace offensive linemen because you don't rotate. I mean, you're playing, if you're the starting right tackle, you're playing the whole game. Like you don't get subbed out. You don't get, the only way you get subbed out is if you get hurt or if you're not playing well and they've got someone else that they're trying to get a look at in a game situation. So, there was a time where my first game, I'd play like the third series of every game, and eventually took that job over because I started playing better. Just because Tim Schaefer was the right tackle, he started the game, and eventually I was a lot more productive than he was. So then they just made me the starter, and then I didn't rotate out ever. So it's tough, but I think that's part of the beauty of offensive line and why it's hard to replace offensive linemen is that you don't get to rotate guys in. It's not like the D line where Mike Hall and Jack Sawyer and Ty Leak are three presumptive starters. They weren't really starters last year. None of them were starters last year. They all were rotational guys that were behind older guys, but they got a lot of experience. Where on the O-line, you don't get that extra little layer of experience from rotating in and playing 25, 30 snaps. Like the O-line, it's either all or nothing. So again, like when people when they rotate in and out, like it is what it is. But I did not hear what Tress said about the ton game. That'll be I hope we're proud of Ann Arbor. Did Trust say that recently? That'd be amazing. Nevada, did you hear that Tressel said that on November 25th that the Buckeyes will make us proud in Ann Arbor? Did he say that today? Nevada?
I hope he did.
I,
That'd be awesome if he did.
I mean, that's, calling your shot when you're not the guy that has to go out and do it is like, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's okay. I mean, it's different when you're the head coach and you call that shot like he did in 2001. But, I mean, to say, hey, we're going to go whoop Michigan, and then you get to like sit on your sofa and, eat popcorn and pizza while the game's going on. Like, that's okay, I
Well,
guess.
but it's not like he didn't call his shot before, though. You know what I'm saying? So this is a guy who's done. I mean, he's kind of walked the walk. You know what I'm saying? Like he got out there, and even though in the inevitable Tressel way, he left himself a little bit of wiggle room because he didn't say we're going to beat Michigan. He just said we're going to make us proud, and that was such a Tressel thing to say. I mean, I
Yes.
think that statement more than anything kind of summed up his entire career. I mean, that guy was so clever to always leave himself an out, always leave himself some little shadow of a doubt. Never really like he didn't attack the fans. He talked about the miserable fans, but really you knew exactly what he was saying when he was saying it. But that was his magic. I mean, I really think it's a shame that he never went into politics because I think he would have just been just a brilliant politician and a guy that could have been governor, a guy that could have been president. I mean, Jim Tressel maybe he's a little bit too bland for that, but I just think he would have been extraordinary in anything that he wanted to do because he was a born politician and certainly spoke like one.
Yeah, he's a genius. I mean, he's like an AI robot when it comes to like say like you said. He didn't say, "Hey, we're going to go up there and whip them, or we're going to beat them," or because it really wasn't like bulletin board material, but it was something that people have always pointed to as like one of the coolest moments in Ohio State football history is when he said, in 318 days or whatever it is, like you'll be proud of our young men in Ann Arbor, Michigan, like because like yeah, you could print that off and put it on the bulletin board. It's like well, but like if I'm a player and I'm in Michigan's locker room and I read that quote, I'm not like oh man, we're gonna go get him now because he said that they're gonna be proud of him in Ann Arbor. Like that's not, it's a very kind of it's extremely measured, but it's also very kind of smooth. Like it's a little smooth little way of saying, hey, we're gonna beat you guys, but it wasn't the gruff, and we're gonna go whoop them or beat their, whatever. Like so. I don't know. Like that's why Chess is the best man because he can just mess with people's minds, and it doesn't even and for normal people, they're just like, well, I mean, I hope they're proud of them. I mean, maybe that means that they're gonna show up and have 48 academic all Big Ten, members or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but Kirk, I'm like, and I know we've talked about this before, but like night before the game, night before the Michigan game, or right before the Michigan game, or whatever it is, do you bring out like the deep fake secret video showing Harbaugh saying Ohio State could never beat us in a million years. We're gonna kick their arses and beat them 100-0 or something like that, and just like just psych out your team. I mean, like, is that fair game? Would you do something like that if you were the coach?
I mean, yeah, with AI and stuff, I think that the time to play that is the night before the game, just to get people nice and frosty when they get ready to go to bed. Right before the game, I mean, guys are listening to, they got their headphones in, they're listening to music, they're already kind of in that psychotic mindset to go play the game. And I don't think that like there's anything you can do to get people more jacked up for that game. Like you don't need like a highlight tape or a deep fake of Jim Harbaugh saying he's gonna, whoop us, or whatever. So I don't know. Like I think the night before the game would be the time to do that because that's when you get a lot of motivation. It's time you can think about stuff. Pregame before the bus ride, usually, Urban gives a speech and you watch a highlight video. I don't know, but that's a great question. But like, with Michigan, it's like you never, I mean, you don't need, again, it's the ultimate cliche, but like, you don't need motivated to play Michigan. And now, especially after they've smacked us 2 straight years, like you definitely don't need motivation. Like when I was like, I always go back to my senior year because it was my last one, but those guys talked a lot. Mike Hart talked a lot. Jake Long did not talk much. Chad Henne did not talk much. But Jake Long, I mean, Mike Hart gave us all this bulletin board material, and we weren't favored. We were picked to be third in the Big Ten. So, my biggest thing is I don't want to give them any bulletin board material. I was always very complimentary, very Tressel-esque, just because Tressel's my guy, and so I tried to emulate his boring analysis of opponents, and because again, like you don't want to give those guys any juice because they gave us a lot of juice, which was it's their fault and it was stupid, but I always just be complimentary, and then like when it came game time, it's time for Norman Bates to come out of the tunnel and get cranking, but I don't know. It's interesting. 'Cause I'm excited because, like I said, this is the biggest Michigan game in a while. I mean, we're down 0-2. We got to go to Ann Arbor. A lot on the line, man. I mean, it's never too early to start thinking about those guys because I guarantee you they're thinking about us, and they got the momentum now, which is crazy to say after the 20-year run we had. Shout out, we got Birmingham, we got Berkeley, man. We got people from all over the place in here tonight. Delaware County, shout out to the 411 dudes. I love that. My go-to music to get hype before the game. I used to listen to the Any Given Sunday speech, which was my favorite all time. Like I love the Al Pacino speech. I'd listen to Korn. I'd listen to AC/DC, Disturbed. And I listened to like a lot of rap too. But like right before the game, it was Korn and Disturbed and all that crazy metal stuff. But it's a pretty like stereotypical like the offensive tackle on Any Given Sunday. But I listened to Any Given Sunday speech followed by Phil Collins in the air tonight, and then I'd have like just a mix of just stuff that was usually pretty good. But I mean, you can't like listen to some of it too quick because you don't want to. You got to kind of peak your anger and rage like right before kickoff. You can't like do it 3 hours before the game because then you're just kind of. It's like you're on like a mouse running on a treadmill, and you got to kind of, you're like, I was always chilled in the locker room at first, and then it was kind of built up into what became like an inferno. But with Urban, with Tress, the locker room was quiet and everybody had their headphones in, which is fine. And then with Urban, he brought in these giant speakers. So they would play this like mind-numbingly loud music the whole pregame, and that's fine too. Like, there's different ways to skin a cat, but I always like having my own music in just because if I don't like the music I'm listening to, like it's not going to get me in the right mood to get right, so to speak. Any thoughts on that, Nevada? Are you surprised I listened to Phil Collins before the game?
What? Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, I was thinking like you listen to cool jazz or something like that, something to kind of slow you down. You know what I'm saying? Or before the game against Florida, you were eating In-N-Out burger in the locker room or something like that, fighting over Anthony Gonzalez's girlfriend
with Troy. I know that again. Like it's funny because Gonza got asked about that. Like he said, I've been asked about that like 1,000 times in his life, the Troy Smith thing, and I'm like, it's the most incredibly funny. And again, kudos to whoever came up with that urban legend, man, because that is like. That thing has stood the test of time. It's almost unbelievable. I love it. But Phil Collins in the air tonight for night games. That's the greatest song ever made. They play that at every NFL stadium. They played that at Penn State in 05 at night, 07 at night. It's like the perfect football song. But yeah, it's a great one. We're going to get into. We have a monster defensive tackle who just announced he's going to take an official visit here. DeAndre Robinson is a big dude, so we're gonna dig into his film a little bit. He's again Larry Land. We're trying to get some of these D tackles in the fold. 4-star guy. He's got all the favorites. He's got Texas and Bama, Georgia. I mean, he's got kind of everybody. He's coming up. I believe June 8th to 10th, that official visit weekend. Nevada, how important is it to replace defensive tackles? Because there's a small chance, but a decent chance that Mike Hall and Ty Lee could both declare. I think they both need to play a lot better and be a lot more durable. But there's some of these guys got the itis. Like I know JT's out the door, Jack Sawyer wants to be out the door, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like we benefit as fans when guys are not anxious to leave, but their goal is to leave after 3 years. So that means they got to have a big year this year. So the defense has to be better. There has to be more pressure on the quarterback, more sack production. But how important is it that we replenish the defensive tackle depth chart, so to speak?
Well, let me just ask you a different question. And again, this is something that we haven't talked about, so I just want to ask you, get your just quick reaction response to the people out there. Larry Johnson still have his fastball? I mean, is any of the productivity or the lack of productivity from the defensive line on Larry Johnson? Is any of that Larry Johnson's fault? Or what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely his fault. It's his room, And again, I'm not saying that to be critical. Because I have a lot of respect for Larry Johnson. I've said a million times. I've coached against him. I've played against his guys. I know how hard his guys are. I went to Penn State camp in like ninth grade, and he was the D line coach, and I was running around when I thought I was a defensive end. But yeah, like I mean, you gotta. I don't know what it is going to take to motivate some of these guys to be more productive or play better. And I know that, like, these are some prideful guys. Like, I mean, Jack Sawyer, JT2 Milano, those guys want to be great. They're not, and they put in the work. And for whatever reason, like it's just not clicking. And again, this is why, this third year is the money year. And these guys are all sharpening up because they all want to get out of here and go get paid like Paris Johnson just did. It's the good thing about Ohio State is like when you're in that locker room and you sit around here. I used to go against Paris. Wow, Paris went 6 overall. Wow, I could go top 20, because I used to beat Paris in practice or whatever. Or you see Jackson Smith and Jig, but CJ Stroud. There's this culture of 3 and out, which is good because, if you're a superstar and you can do it, I mean, there's a chance that you can go be a 3 and out millionaire. And I think JT is on that trajectory. I think that when these crazy mock drafts for 2024 come out and you see Mike Hall in the first round. You see Jack Sawyer in the first round. You see JT in the first round. Like they literally have 3 of our defensive linemen in the first round. And it's amazing because our fan base hates Jack Sawyer for whatever reason. And he's like one of the toughest, nicest kids you could ever meet. And these NFL people, like they really like these guys. And I think that a guy like Jack, I think that, the mismanagement of Jack Sawyer was one of the topics that I don't think got enough attention last year when they had him play that Jack position. And we didn't run it. Like we made him the starting jack and we never played the jack. We played him 10 plays a game. And, if you're a defensive lineman or if you're an offensive lineman or if you're just a player on the team, like you got to get in the rhythm of the game and playing, 5 plays a half or 10 plays a half, whatever it is, when other guys are playing 45 plays, it just doesn't make any sense. You never get into the feel of the game. And again, I think football is a big time rhythm thing, especially for linemen. You gotta keep getting hit and getting a feel for the guys you're going against. So when you're playing, 12 plays in a game because they run that stupid jack thing, then that doesn't do it for you. But yeah, I think, if a unit is not productive, regardless of who has declared early, regardless of who's left, then the position coach has to be held responsible. And that's in recruiting, that's in the production of the team. That's just my opinion, but I'm right. This is not really an opinion. Like if you're the head of a unit, like, and the guys aren't productive and they're not getting to the quarterback for whatever reason, like you have to figure out a way to make them better, and that counts the back end. Again, like, there were a lot of questions about our secondary last year, and Ryan Day addressed it by making Tim Walton kind of the head of the secondary, and he wants those guys all to meet together and be in the room and be more coordinated together. And we saw it, like, when it would rear its ugly head, it was when we were playing really good teams, so I think that,
but explain something to me. Explain something to me. Okay. You've got our unit. Let's look at our units last year. Defensive line, Johnson, cornerbacks, Walton, safeties, Eliano, linebackers, Knowles. Which group of those 4 did the best in your opinion in terms of improvement from the previous year to last year? I mean, to me, it's a pretty obvious answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously the linebackers because Tommy Eichenberg should have been All-American.
Yeah, so it's the linebackers. But like, which guy takes the most abuse from our fan base? Knowles, the guy.
He's the coordinator. That's just how it is. Like if you're a coordinator at Ohio State, you are naturally going to be hated by the fan base. It doesn't matter if you're Tom Herman or that's just how it is.
But I get that. But it's like, but how do the guys that are the actual position coaches escape? I mean, I just said, let's hate Knowles and Walton, or let's hate Knowles and Johnson, or let's hate Knowles and Eliano. But it's just like, we just hate Knowles. And I just don't understand that because it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, who's doing the rotations? Who's sending the guys out there? It's the position coach. It's not Knowles. Knowles isn't telling Larry Johnson who to put out there. I mean, when you hear that, like I said, I just find the criticisms kind of funny because it's like, I mean, man, these other position coaches have just gotten off, and I don't think they had a good year. I don't think Larry's had a couple of good years. I don't think Walton Eliano had good years at all. And I'm down on all the group until they can improve. Now, I happen to think the group's going to be elite this year, and we're all going to be singing their praises. But it's kind of interesting how we got to this point. The second question I have for you is, does Johnson have a type of defensive lineman that he seems to be proficient at recruiting, more of the defensive end types as opposed to the big body interior guys? And is that an issue for Ohio State? Because I've heard that rumbling coming out of Ohio State before, that Larry likes to recruit those defensive ends and not so much those defensive tackles. is fair criticism or not fair criticism?
Well, here's the thing. I think it's a fair criticism, but I also think that, for me, I think the hardest part about us not finding these defensive tackles is that our school isn't based in Georgia. We're not based in Louisiana. We're not LSU. We're not Georgia. Because again, I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. And some people that are intelligent will listen, and some people that aren't won't. But these big kids do not like to leave home. Now, the great equalizer is the NIL stuff, because now you can get kids like, you just pay them more, they'll come. But, in the past, man, it's like when you would look around the country and, and you just say, Kirk, what schools have the best defensive tackles in the country? I'll say LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Florida State. And where are they all located? In the South. And then go look where those kids come from. They're not coming from Ohio. They're not coming from Michigan. They're not coming from Indiana, Pennsylvania. Brian Kelly is the same guy that he was at Notre Dame. And now magically his defensive tackles are a million times better. And all these kids that are really good defensive tackles that are from New Orleans and from the swamps of Louisiana, they all magically want to go play for him now. So again, it's hard to get some of these big guys to come north. Now, can we pull some kids out of Florida? Sure. Is it possible to pull like some of the top tier defensive tackles out of Georgia? I guess, but I mean, again, when you're in coaching and you're in recruiting, you really got to figure out how to spend your resources. Because if you're going to go visit somebody, it's just like being in sales. Like, I mean, if you have no chance to get somebody, then the earlier you can figure that out, the better it is for you just to move on. Like, we don't like, at Ohio State, we don't even recruit the state of Louisiana, because anybody that's good in the state of Louisiana is going to LSU. So we don't even go down there. And I mean, where's Glenn Dorsey from? Louisiana. Where's Tyson Jackson from? Louisiana. Like, so again, like I think, and honestly, it's the same thing with the offensive line, because people are like, why can't we get all these good offensive linemen? Like, well, because they all live in Georgia and they all live in Florida and Texas, and those guys are, those are really good schools there that have a lot of money, and they also have the home field advantage. You got to get a kid to leave mama behind, come up north, come to Ohio. It's a long flight, it's a long drive, whatever. And again, is it impossible? No, I'm not trying to have despair in this podcast, but that's just reality. Like, guys, like go look at Georgia's roster. Tell me where all these big monsters on defense, they're big D tackles. The kid that won all the awards 2 years ago, plays for the Eagles out, Jordan Davis. He's from like South Carolina, so he's right down the street from Athens. It's not a real far drive. And honestly, like I mean, Clemson was in on him in recruiting. You go look at these really, really good defensive tackles. They're from Georgia. They're from LSU. So I mean, it's hard like to get some of those kids coming. Now, sometimes you'll find some good ones that are in that that Baltimore area, that DC, and Virginia, and Larry's done really well out there just because he'd been at Penn State for so long and recruited the East Coast like crazy. Pulled kids out of New York State, like Jimmy Kennedy, was one of the big D tackles he had at Penn State, because Penn State always had great defensive tackles, but they were usually from that East Coast area. He didn't have many that were from Georgia, Florida, Texas, Louisiana. So I think that it's kind of, it's kind of it's like playing cards. If you get a good hand in a given year in recruiting, then great. But big guys are not as flashy as receivers. They're not as they're not as quick to leave to go to a program. Because people are like, well, we'll just recruit like Brian Hartline and just go get everyone from everywhere. I'm like, well, yeah, we've always been able to get receivers from Florida. I mean, we got Santonio Holmes and Michael Jenkins and Chris Gamble. Those are all Florida kids. And so that's been going on for 20 years. Like, it's hard to go get those superstar D tackles out of Georgia, Louisiana, Bama, Florida. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. We should take the swings. And I think Ohio State's brand is exceptionally strong right now. And I think that with NIL, it makes it easier, because now, mama doesn't have to pay to travel. Because if you get an NIL check for $80,000 the first day you get here, like a lot of these guys just did, then you can help mama get up here. You can put her in, there's some freshmen that have 2 and 3 bedroom apartments already, so that their families can literally stay with them, for game weeks, or if they just want to come visit. So again, it's a lot easier to get these kids now, just because now these guys have some money It's a lot easier to gas up the car and drive, to Athens if you're from Atlanta and go see your kid play than it is to fly to Columbus every weekend and then fly to the away Big Ten stadiums. A lot easier to do that now that your kid has a little money in his pocket. So, again, I get sick of trying to argue. It's not even an argument because it just is what it is. Like, when it comes to big bodies, they're in the South and they don't like to leave home very often. Now we can combat that. Like Samson Okunlola left Jersey and went to Miami because he got a fortune from Miami. So you can combat that if you got the bag, if you get the money. But otherwise, man, it's like, Brian Kelly's.
Kirk, there's one other thing you can do, and Ohio State's done a pretty good job of this. But you could go full bore after the Polynesian players because the Polynesians are the other big bodies. And we've done it with Haskell, we've done it with Tommy, we've done it with JT. I would go full born in terms of having that recruiting guy that maybe one of your staff guys, maybe like your James Laurinaitis in the linebacker room, but hire a Polynesian coach and put somebody out there on the West Coast and really mind the Polynesians because that's been the exclusive domain. Look at all the defensive linemen for USC, for Washington, for Utah,
Oregon,
for UCLA, Oregon. They're all Polynesian players, and Columbus has got a large Polynesian population. They'll come to Ohio State, and that's the one thing that you could do to combat the lack of the big bodies or the preponderance of big bodies down in the deep South is really mind the Polynesian players. And I think Ohio State's done it to a certain degree. I think they should go out or a little bit more aggressively because I think that's really the key because that's what the West Coast teams have feasted on for defensive linemen because there just aren't that many big bodies even out on the West Coast. But the Polynesian players, they fill the bill.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think if you get a young Polynesian coach on the staff that's kind of looks like him in the mirror, then that helps. Because Oregon, it's not an accident they have Tosh Dupois as their D-line coach. So they beat us on Mateo. Obviously, he got an NIL bag, but I think that the Polynesian thing is a great idea just because if you're flying from the islands, and you got to fly, you got to go to the mainland anyways if you want to play real football. Because you can't play for the Hawaii Rainbows and hope to get drafted. But once you gotta get to the mainland, like what's another 6-hour flight to Ohio once you've already been there? But no, it's the Polynesians are freaky athletes. Like the guys I played with in the NFL were the strongest guys I played with were Polynesian. I'm talking like crazy strong. But yeah, it's all good. We got a great super chat here talking about D-line. How good was Vernon Golson while comparing him to other Buckeye D linemen? It's a great question. Vernon really came on his junior year. I was in 2007. It was my senior year. He was like a part-time captain, exceptionally strong. Obviously, everyone's seen the photos of him with the biceps and the veins popping out of his arms and everything. Really a great teammate, really quiet guy. Kept him. Maybe the most quiet player I ever played with. He was not a guy that was a punk. Like I really liked Vern. Vern was a good friend of mine. I was really surprised that he didn't pan out in the NFL the way that a lot of people projected him to. But he was tremendously productive at Ohio State his junior year. He was one of the big factors as to why we were number one, we were literally number one in the country in total defense in 2007. And he was a big reason why. He was a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, I believe. He had, I think, 13 and a half sacks. He was getting to the quarterback. Obviously beat Jake Long in the game. Had 2 or 3 sacks up in Ann Arbor, and the real famous photo of him crushing Chad Henne. So I in terms of the guys that I've played against, he's probably 2, I'd say, just based off his senior year. He went 6 overall in the draft, so obviously he had a fantastic senior year. Ran a 4.6. Will Smith is number 1. No one's gonna touch Will. Mike Kudla is probably right in that mix with 2-3 because when Kudla was on, he was like a stronger Elvis Dumerville. He's the guy that I was shocked didn't do more in the NFL just because he was such a strong, low to the ground dude. And he wasn't a prototype, but his last game against Notre Dame, he had like 3 sacks versus Ryan Harris. And Ryan Harris was like a 2nd round pick. So I was shocked when Kudes didn't get drafted, and he benched 48 reps and ran a 4.6, and it was one of those weird things where I've seen guys that I play with, or guys that have been at the program that lasted a few years in the league or did 5-6 years in the league that weren't anywhere near as good as Kudla. But yeah, he's right in that sphere. Like I said, I love Kudes, and again, I'm sad that he's gone. And 4, I mean, Cam Hayward, it's tough because I played against him when he was a freshman, and he was starting as a freshman, as a true freshman, which is outstanding. Obviously, if I'd have played against him when he was even older and even better, he's probably in the top 3 for sure. But yeah, we had some really good guys like that I was able to go against in the run. So appreciate that, D Sonny.
Now, Kula was. I'm trying. I am getting old, but if I'm not mistaken, and I might be, was it Hawk Carpenter, Kula, and DeAndrea that all came in the same class?
Oh yeah, they're all 1 year older than me, so they're all in that '02 class with Maurice and Troy Smith and Zwick. It was
what a class. I mean, like, oh my goodness.
I mean, that's Antonio Holmes. It's like, and that's like kind of the difference now is like you could take that class and go win multiple national championships. You get a couple classes like that, and you just look at the depth of it. I mean, you get Maurice Claret, the best running back in the country. You get Zwick and Troy, one wins the Heisman Trophy, one was a 5-star or whatever. Receiver, you get Santonio Holmes, Roy Hall. O-line, you get Mangold, Rob Sims, Daddish, TJ Downing, all multi-year starters. 2 guys that played over 8 years in the league. D-line, you get Quinn Pitcock. I mean, it's just like every single layer of the team was improved and in a dramatic way. I mean, and again, like you don't really get that kind of talent in Ohio anymore. I mean, every guy I just named was an Ohio kid, and except for Santonio and Nate Sally was a kid that was from St. Thomas Aquinas. He's our first Aquinas guy, but yeah, you don't see that kind of talent in Ohio in terms of taking like a 25-man class with 18 guys being from Ohio, and they're all 5-star, 4-star, like top tier type dudes. So, does Coach Johnson sub too much? That is a great question. I don't think so. I mean, I think that you have to on the D line. The difference between the D line and the O line. When people say, "Well, why doesn't the O line sub?" Well, because the O line doesn't have to run to the ball. And D line, they have to run to the ball, pursue. So defensive line is a much more exhausting position than O line, which is why they rotate. I don't think he subs too much. I think that he subs like last year. I thought he played the wrong players. I thought that we had guys that would get in and they'd be really productive for their 15 snaps, and then there'd be guys that would be in for 35 snaps that would have less production somehow with twice as many snaps. So, and I think that a lot of those guys have moved on. We had a bunch of guys that were undrafted free agents, which at Ohio State, like it's hard to get drafted, but if you're undrafted and 32 teams pass on you 252 total picks or 255 or whatever it is, like that's hard. Like that's kind of, and you're not a failure. Andrew Norwell didn't get drafted. I almost didn't get drafted. But we need guys at those positions, especially 3 technique, to be high tier picks. Like we've had at quarterback, like we've had at receiver. And I think we can get back to that. But again, it's tough because you gotta go find those guys. I think adding Tywan Malone in the portal will be interesting to see what we can get out of him. Again, a lot of these guys, they're getting into summer conditioning, man, and some of these guys are in better shape than others, and they're gonna figure it out real quick. How we're doing. The 7'6", 430-pound Trump University commit is like committed. I love some of these comments; those are great. But yeah, I think we need to get some DNs. I mean, I'm worried about DN more than anywhere, just because. JT is going to be gone after this year. Jack Stewart could be gone. So, you're really thin. And again, I don't worry too far into the future because with the transfer portal, you can go find an impact guy right away if the depth chart is promising. But, yeah, I've been watching this. I want to break down a little bit of this film, but yeah, this is the kind of kid I'd love to get. He's a big bodied dude from Orlando. Has some great gold teeth. And, this guy looks like a Florida Gator kind of guy. Obviously, he could get in better shape. I can't be too critical when they're playing in Florida and it's 10,000 degrees. But these are the kind of guys that Coach Mickle, he'll get his hands on him, man, and this kid will lose some weight. He'll get in better shape. He'll play lower, tougher. But these are the kind of kids we got to pull. And like Orlando is a place where we've had success and we've been able to pull kids out of. So that's not the same as going into Georgia, going into Ellis, or going into Louisiana. So again, we're on the dance floor. He's coming up to visit Ohio State. So, and again, I would just show some of these kids like this is our depth chart. We have Mike and Tyleek that could both be gone. We got Ty Hamilton and Taiwan. So you'll be one in the 3-4 deep, with Hero Canoe and some of these guys the day you get here. So yeah, and you can't get enough of these big body D tackles that are just awful to go against, So again, I like the he can get a lot more refined. And again, like this is a kid, he's a raw talent. He's not anywhere near as refined as he needs to be in the pass rush. But Larry, like our guys are really good using their hands generally. So, I think from a technique standpoint, I think Larry's guys really do well, but they just they got to cut them loose on the pass rush a little bit. I think that they're a little stagnant sometimes with the things that they allow these kids to do, and they just got to let them get after it a little bit. So, what other questions do we have? What else you got for me, Nevada? That was actually a really good question.
Well, yeah, it's funny because when I look at this guy's tape and I'm like, to me, this is exactly the kind of player that we need to get, and I think Ohio State feels like they've got a puncher's chance, to get this kid out of the South, and for Ohio State right now, I mean, I think we're kind of at a crossroads on the defensive line, and as you mentioned, we've got some veteran players that have flashed stuff that's encouraging, but they really haven't put together that dominant season yet. And I think we're all waiting for that to happen. I mean, can Tyleek and Mike and JT and Jack Sawyer go out there and dominate like some of the great, defensive lines? We all know it when we see it. We know what great defensive line play is, and we just have not seen it the last couple of years. And I'm cautiously optimistic we're going to get it this year. I know the guys think they're going to get after it. But, last year I was hoping with simplifying the defense and, kind of simplifying some of the calls and giving the guys a little bit more freedom that we'd have seen a little bit more productivity, especially in terms of sacks. But, we didn't get there, but maybe that was an aberration. And maybe it was just, something that's, not to be alarmed about. But, I think this year, if we're not getting double-digit sacks out of our key guys, then something's really wrong. And I'd be shocked if that didn't happen.
Yeah, and this is a Georgia kid, Edric Hughes, so this is probably the best defensive end in the country. This kid is absolutely ridiculously phenomenal. Again, Georgia's in the game here big time. I think we have a shot. I think we're going to get a visit. But, these are the kind of guys that you need to get to win championships. And that was the most disappointing thing about last year is that we whiffed on Keon Keeley and Mateo. And it was like we came down the stretch and it was just like, Damon Wilson, it was like the ultimate whimper, coming down the stretch. When we were in it with three of the 5 stars that were really dominating players. Let me get another question from D. Sunny. D. Sunny, man, you're carrying this thing. I'm gonna let you answer this first, Nevada. If O State would have won the 2015 national championship, that would have put Urban and Saban at 4 titles each. Do you think that Urban would have pulled ahead eventually? I'll let you take that first, Nevada.
Yeah, it's I think the problem with Urban Meyer at Ohio State was that Urban Meyer was becoming bigger than the university, and that threatened some people within the university, specifically Drake, and those guys were bound and determined to bring him down. And when the Heartline thing came out, or excuse me, the Smith thing came out, it just gave them the excuse to kind of put him in his place. He felt like they, kind of cut him off at the knees, and at that point, the cyst bothered him more, everything bothered him more, and it was time for him to go. So I'm not sure if he would have had time to get out of there, because had he won in 15 after winning in 14, his star would have been so bright. I'm not sure those guys could have handled it, because Ohio State's a very political place, especially at that level, and Meyer was always destined, to kind of go out on his shield, because a guy like that was not going to last forever at Ohio State, because nobody wants, they don't want anybody bigger than the university, and Meyer certainly was. I mean, he was up there with Woody in terms of stature, no question about it, and that's threatening to a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the way that he was evolving, if they could have got that 15, because again, like that 15 team is probably the most talented team in Ohio State history, for being real. I mean, they ran into that Michigan State team that really whooped them that night in the rain with the backup quarterback. That's a game that, in my opinion, is the worst loss in Ohio State history, given the the spread of the talent. Because I mean, Ohio State was better at every position, and they had ultra premium guys like Ezekiel and Joey Bosa, guys that are top 5 picks, and Michigan State had Jack Conklin, who's like a top 15-ish pick or whatever, or top 10 pick. But and he's a tackle, so we had Taylor Decker, we had so many good guys. But I think it would have been fascinating to see how Urban pivoted, because like people talk about Urban is going to run JT up then all, but dude, like he was that coach at 18 when we had Dwayne Haskins and we threw for 50 touchdowns. So it's like he really was advancing the offense and making it more space age under Ryan Day as the OC. And he gave him free rein to do that. It was no more running Dwayne Haskins in the middle and all the the fun narratives that like to be kind of spewed over and over again. But I think that he absolutely would have won more titles because he had that edge. So the hardest part with Urban, and I love Coach Meyer, is that he burns the candle at both ends. And guys that do that, it's hard to sustain. I mean, Nick Saban's been able to do it somehow. And you gotta, the biggest things when you're ultra successful is you have to be ready to backfill your coaching staff, because those guys are going to get poached. Because Nick Saban's gone through more offensive and defensive coordinators than probably any coach in the history of college football over the last since 07, since he got there. And that's something that Urban is going to have to deal with, because he lost Tom Herman. You lose Luke Fickle. These guys start taking off because they want to go run their own programs. Because everyone wants to be a head coach. If you're at Ohio State, you want to be a head coach somewhere. And those guys are all getting poached. So that's the hardest part about that success is, can you backfill? And that's something that Kirby Smart is being able to do. And again, like it's not an accident that Will Muschamp was promoted from being a quality control coach to being the DC after Spencer Lanning went to Oregon, and he was already sitting in the building. He already knew everything. And that's something I think Ohio State's continuing to get better at, is enhancing the bullpen of quality control coaches that are in the building. If Corey Dennis went off to be a head coach somewhere, then Todd Finch is already in the building. He already knows the lingo, and he'd be the new quarterbacks coach. You already have guys sitting in there, which, it's good and bad. But, when you're running like the coaching, like rehab center from a fired head coach, and those guys are still getting paid by another school, why wouldn't you have, Will Muschamp or Tom Herman or somebody like that sit as an analyst on your staff, so that you have kind of an immediate segue in the event somebody moves on? Well, that's a great question. I think he absolutely would have passed Saban, but I don't think we're ever going to know. And the only way it happens now is he has to go somewhere that's got the money and it's got the resources, because with NIL, everything's different. You can turn a program around in a day. And I think like Lincoln Riley, getting 40 new players in the last year or whatever. I mean, it's crazy how quick you can turn it over. What other questions?
I want to jump in on something you just said. You talked about the evolution of the offense, because that's been something that's been widely debated out there. They're talking about how Meyer, the modern offense had passed Meyer by, and Meyer couldn't adjust to the new offense, and that's why we had to get rid of Meyer and blah, blah, blah. But what nobody ever answers when I ask this question is, how many people here, and we'll do a show of hands on the board. You can virtually raise your hand. How many people here have even heard of Ryan Day when Ryan Day plucked him from obscurity to be the offensive coordinator for Ohio State? Who had even heard of him? I mean, I do this for a living, and I'd never heard of him. So it's like, the idea that Meyer couldn't adjust, he was adjusting before our eyes. He was the guy that brought in Day, that introduced the modern passing concepts to Ohio State. That's prima facie evidence of his evolution. And nobody else was doing it because Ryan Day was completely unknown. That was not a household name. If you made a list of the top 20 candidates, Ryan Day wouldn't have made the list.
The top 200 candidates.
Yeah, so it's like how can you not give him all the credit? I mean, the credit for the evolution of the Ohio State offense right now, the great 5-star quarterbacks that we're getting, and this incredible runs of wide receivers that we're getting at a level that we've never seen before, the offensive productivity, that all, the root of that tree is Urban Meyer's hire of Ryan Day. And I mean, let's just be fair about it, because that's where it came from. So, we can talk all we want about running JT between the tackles and his whoopee, and he liked the quarterback run. Man, Meyer liked scoring points. And when that meant the defenses had trouble defending the triple option, he ran that. When it meant that they had trouble covering Percy Harvin, he ran that. When it had trouble, or accounting for the quarterback and the quarterback ran, he ran that. And when he realized that the quarterback and wide receiver position was overpowered, that's where he went. So it's
Yeah.
like you got to give him credit. He was way ahead of the game, and he's the root of the offensive tree for Ohio State, in my opinion, without a doubt.
Well, and I remember when when Ryan Day showed up to interview at Ohio State, like he was with Chip Kelly. They had just gotten fired at San Francisco. They were out there for 1 year. Right after he'd been fired by, they were at Philly. They got fired. Then he went to San Francisco for 1 year and got fired. And I remember, I was like, oh my God, we're about to get Chip Kelly as our offensive coordinator. And then it turns out we're getting Ryan Day. And I was like, who's Ryan Day? Like, no one ever heard of Ryan Day. And again, that's not a knock on Ryan, but when you're a quarterback coach in the NFL, like if I said, Nevada, I'll give you $1 million for every quarterback coach in the NFL you can name right now. You can't name any. You don't know any. Like, I mean, this is how it is. Until you become a coordinator, or you become a head coach, like you're just kind of toiling in obscurity. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just how it is. Like, but how many quarterback coaches can you name in the NFL right now that are the actual quarterback coach, not Frank Wright, who's the head coach, not the OC, it's just a quarterback coach. Like
How about Hackett at the Jets? Isn't Hackett at the Jets? Does he count?
Oh yeah, well that doesn't count because Aaron Rodgers. That's the first one you've ever done. That's the first one you've ever known because he was negotiating with Aaron Rodgers to get Jordy Nelson out of retirement or whatever.
Wasn't Ryan Day the quarterback coach there for San Francisco for Chip Kelly?
Yeah, for that 1 year, and then
There we go.
Then they got fired. They got fired. They're on the bread. They're on the bread line again. They're both out of work
No, I can remember the Nugget. I can remember the Nugget talking about, hey, Chip Kelly's in the building. Or is Meyer going to reunite with Chip Kelly? I do think it was like we didn't know he had the guy with him. He was there on a job interview, but he was bringing his dude. We had no idea. But people talk about Ryan Day like, oh yeah, he was a household name. That was so obvious. And nobody heard of him. Nobody heard of Tom Herman. When he picked Tom Herman, I was like, what? Who? What's a Tom Herman? Tom Herman turned out to be a pretty. You may like him, you may dislike him, you may think he's terrible, you may think his wife is obnoxious, but man, he was a really good offensive coordinator at Ohio State, and he's a talented dude. So I mean, Meyer could pick him, and Meyer didn't care how he won. He just wanted to win, and he had the offensive thing figured out pretty good.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, how did he get Tom Herman? He's called Chip Kelly. Hey, Chip. Who's a good offensive coordinator I should interview? Oh, you should interview that Tom Herman guy. They beat Oklahoma State that year. Oklahoma State was like number 2 in the country, I think. And it was a Thursday night game. And I think like there was a plane crash. Like I think that like someone like I'm not like one of the girls basketball team like died the morning of the plane crash. Something terrible happened. And then they went out and they went into Ames, Iowa, and they lost. So it was like the team, that was a huge upset, and Oklahoma State had, I want to say they had Justin Blackman and Brandon Whedon at the time, so they had like some dudes on their team. Whedon was a first round pick by the Browns, of course, and it was terrible in the pros, but he was a first round quarterback, so they thought enough of him to play. Another super chat, Pizza Rack. This is a good one. Tristan Gibbia has the best arm in spring ball and experience. Would it be smart to throw support behind him and get him ready for the season? Nevada, I'll let you take that one. I think if that kid's playing, then we are in big trouble. But I'll let you go with that one.
I mean, look, he didn't look horrible in practice. He didn't look horrible in the spring game, but he's limited. And there's a reason that he's here, and it's really not the play. It's about life after football, and everybody kind of realizes that. And look, we're only going to be as good as Kyle McCord is going to be this year, or Devin Brown. And I think Kyle McCord is going to get every opportunity to be the guy. But if he's not the guy, Ryan Day's going to pull him, and he's going to go to Devin. And we talked about the offensive line. If I'm wrong and the offensive line's terrible, then Devin Brown better be the quarterback because he can move around back there. So I think there's a lot of things. But I think the offensive line is going to be fine. I think the offense is going to look at the quarterback position as, I won't say caretaker, but just a custodian, a guy that just makes good, responsible decisions. And frankly, as we talked about the quarterback position in the spring, the only thing that really bugged me about McCord's game was the almost turnovers that he threw. Because he almost threw like 4 passes that
No.
could have been picked, and it's like that's the killer. Like
Yeah.
Tressel always said, every possession's got to end in a kick. A field goal, an extra point, or a punt, and that'd be a good motto for the Ohio State offense this year as well. Because also this is a little known fact for you fans out there. Ohio State used to consider a winning effort on offense during Kirk's time was 24 points. If you score, was it 24 points? Was that a winning? That was a winning effort, right?
Yep. 24 points.
Boy, times have changed, man. It's like,
I mean, literally, because there was some statistic, and I remember me and Gonzo used to always make fun of it, where they'd put it up on the overhead projector, and it's like, when we score 24 points, we win like 98% of our games. So obviously, this is the mid 2000s, and Gonzo's like, well, why don't we figure out what the number is where we've never lost and make that the goal? If it's 31 or 32 or 35, or make that the goal. Because if we score X amount of points, then we've never lost. So that he's like, well, that should be the goal. Not that we win 95 out of 100. Like, what's the one where we win 100% of the time? So, but again, like that was the game, as you mentioned, is much different. The game is completely different. Like, I mean, the defense has their hands tied behind their back now, just because they call defensive pass interference, illegal touching, not illegal touching, illegal contact. It's so much easier to throw the ball now. It's way harder to cover as a defensive back. So, everything's skyrocketed from a points perspective, because that's what sells tickets. That's what gets better TV ratings. Everybody wants to watch a 7-3 slog, or they want to see 35 to 42-35 as the final score, because you see touchdowns and you see more activity, and that's what they want now. Yeah, I don't think Tristan Gibby is a real. I mean, he's on like year 7. If he really wanted to was a serious NFL guy, he'd have gone somewhere where he could have been the starter, because I'm sure he's good enough to start somewhere, just not here. And if he is, it's scary. It's interesting because like I think it's the opposite. I think our running game, if we run the quarterback a little bit, I don't think we see many 8-man fronts, just because. I think that Ryan does a lot more 2 tight end stuff, and that might draw an 8-man front. But with our 3 receivers, when you've got a Mecca, especially if you play Carnell Tate over Julian, and then you've got Marvin, if they run an 8-man box, we better throw for about 600 yards in the game, because they're going to get torched. And it was funny. I talked to James Peoples. I talked to Tony Alford about this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, if I was a running back, I'd love to play an Ohio State's offense, because you're never going to see a loaded box, because they have to keep safeties back versus these receivers, or else, like I said, you're going to get absolutely scorched. If you try to play a single high safety and keep a safety in that box, man, you're going to get destroyed. Especially if we play Devin Brown and we run some read option stuff, because then it's really hard to defend. And again, the reason why I like running the quarterback is because it just makes us a billion times harder to defend than just having a stagnant stand in the pocket. And it's great to be able to throw the ball, but it rains sometimes and it gets a little crappy sometimes. And so when you're not throwing it as well and guys can't catch it because it's wet, like, you better be able to run the ball. And I think we found out the hard way last year. Like, we couldn't run the ball when we needed to. And also, I think we need to be in 3-point stances more. Again, I have no idea why we weren't in 3-point stances when we need to run the ball against Georgia, but that's just my pet peeve. Again, when these guys go, Justin Fry, and again, I love Justin Fry, but when these guys are hitting the sleds in pre-practice and during practice, and there's videos of these guys hitting the sleds, they're never in a 2-point stance. So then when you really need the yardage against Georgia or Michigan, why are you in a 2-point stance? Get a 3-point, come off the rock, stay low, move the guy. Yeah, this is my diatribe for the night. Nevada, we're going to wrap this up. We watched some good D linemen tonight, broke down some stuff. Summer conditioning is cranking up. We'll have a lot more next week. This week is just kind of a light get guys in. Some of these transfer guys like Jason Simmons, they're just getting baseline testing and seeing where they're at conditioning wise. But it's going to start to heat up soon. And conditioning, I promise you, sucks. It's probably the worst time of the entire year, summer conditioning. So, but Nevada, any final thoughts for this episode?
No, I think we're going to have a report shortly on how Simmons is looking in conditioning, because I think that's one of the big question marks is what do we have there, and I think we'll know at least a little bit from a physical standpoint here in the next week or so. I think we've got some guys that are on potential commitment watch. We've got some stuff going on recruiting. We've got my guy Corey Connors, one stroke off the lead, the PGA Championship as well at 90-1 odds was my pick to win the PGA Championship. So liking that one as well. So yeah, lots going on. But the conditioning stuff should start trickling out here over the next 24, 48 hours, and we should have some interesting reports on that.
AKA what guys look good and what guys are hurting. Because there are going to be some guys that are hurting once the summer starts, especially that have been through it before. So, well, we're going to wrap this thing up. Again, we appreciate you. We know that the games are kicking off pretty quick here. So, appreciate you guys. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. If you could leave us a like, I would very much appreciate that. Click subscribe and also click that little alert bell so you guys get an alert when we go live. We appreciate you guys. We try to knock these out before these playoff games start because I know that you guys want to watch the Lake Show and watch LeBron. So, again, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. Shout out where you're from in the comments. Let me know what recruit do we have to land. Put that in the comments. Edric Houston would be my dream guy right there because he's a monster at defensive end. But put it in the comments. I want to hear it from you. And again, I appreciate you guys. I saw we got Hawaii in the building. Shout out the 808. So again, thank you guys all for tuning in tonight. As always, we're always going to be around. We're getting on BuckeyesScoop.com. We have a huge thread on playoff gambling, a bunch of football stuff. Bill Green's chat was today, so we've been cranking it. So as always, thank you so much, Buckeye Nation, and thank you, Scoop family. I'll see you guys on BuckeyesScoop.com. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.